This episode of Fluid Power Forum is sponsored by IFP Motion Solutions Incorporated, the leader at engineering electronics into fluid power distribution. IFP spans the 13 central states from Minnesota to Texas. For more information, visit ifpusa.com.
As you can imagine, the ocean is typically not conducive to stable movement from the one area to the next and can vary from relatively calm to somewhat extreme. And these motion compensated gangways use hydraulic cylinders to provide stability at the point of transfer and allow people and materials to cross safely.
Welcome to Fluid Power Forum, a podcast of the National Fluid Power Association. I'm your host, Eric Lenke, and it's my job to interview interesting people who are moving fluid power technology forward. If you'd like to be part of our show, we ask that you follow us on Twitter. You can find us there at the NFPA. And make sure to share those interesting and innovative uses of fluid power with our hashtag #OnlyFluidPowerCan. That is actually one of the ways that we source topics for our show. If you see an interesting application of fluid power and you want to learn more about it, you can share it on social media with that hashtag #OnlyFluidPowerCan. And you just might hear it discussed on a future episode of Fluid Power Forum. Also, please subscribe to our show. You can find us on Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify. We're on most of the other podcatching services that are out there. Wherever you find us, please subscribe and then give us a quick rating. Those ratings really do help more and more of our friends in the industry learn about the show and join in on these important conversations. On today's show, we have two guests, Michael Cook and Domenico Tucci. They are both work for Trelleborg Sealing Solutions, which is one of the world's leading developers, manufacturers, and suppliers of precision seals, bearings, and custom molded polymer components. Michael is the Global Segment Director for Off-Highway and the Marketing America Segment Manager for Fluid Power, and Domenico is the Team Lead for IoT Client Solutions. And we asked them into our forum today to talk about Trelleborg's contributions to sustainability initiatives, especially with regard to hydraulic seals and the many different applications that they support. So, Michael and Domenico, welcome to Fluid Power Forum.
Hi, Eric. Happy to be here with you today.
We're glad to have both of you. That was Michael saying hi. Domenico, go ahead.
Hi there. Hi, everybody.
We're in 3 different locations on the podcast today. So, but that's the magic of technologies. Michael, tell us a little bit more about yourself. Let's start with you. What led you into your position at Trelleborg?
Sure. So I joined Trelleborg back in 2013 as an application engineer. And at that time, I was focused primarily on our oil and gas segment being based out of Houston. And then in 2019, I moved over to our fluid power and off-highway segments as a technical specialist. And there I focused primarily on the product strategy for those markets and was able to play a key role in some of the recent product launches that we've had to enhance our product offerings here in the Americas. So this experience really gave me the proper background to take on this new role of Global Segment Director that I started back in December of last year. And now my focus is really on growing our global customer base in these markets and also continuing to create value for those customers.
That's great. It sounds like you have a varied amount of experience at Trelleborg. Were you in the industry prior to Trelleborg, or?
I had just a single year out of college at a company that actually manufactures springs. So there was some fluid power in that role, but Trelleborg has been the main job that I've had for the majority of my career here.
As we say, fluid power is everywhere. So it's interesting where people first discover it as they go through their career trajectories. Domenico, how about you? Tell us more about your background and how you came to your position in Trelleborg.
Sure. So I'm actually dialing in today from Stuttgart in Germany. I've been working for Trelleborg here in Germany for about 7 years. And my current role is developing IoT solutions for customers. So some of those solutions involve the performance or the life of the seal, and other projects are more focused on supply chain. So IoT, or the Internet of Things, for those who are not familiar with it, is about collaboration between engineers, data scientists, and a bunch of other disciplines. But it's also about collaboration between suppliers and OEMs, working together to figure out how to make things better, smarter, and ultimately more sustainable. So my job really is facilitating the ideation process and then taking those ideas from drawing board to production.
Yeah, that sounds exciting. And we've done several episodes in the past about IoT and its interface with fluid power products. And it sounds like Trelleborg has a robust team dedicated to those kinds of initiatives.
Yeah, definitely. So we have a few of those resources located here in Germany, and we have resources in India and other parts of the world as well.
That's great. And maybe you can tell our listeners a little bit more about Trelleborg itself as a company. I gave it a brief introduction at the start, but maybe, Michael, you can tell us more about Trelleborg as a company. What does it do?
Sure. So as you previously mentioned, Eric, Trelleborg Sealing Solutions is a leading global developer, manufacturer, and supplier of precision seals, bearings, and custom molded polymer components. So with that, we really try to focus on meeting the most demanding needs of our customers, and we do this across a multitude of industries, with fluid power being one of the most important of those. In our network, we extends to over 25 production facilities where we're actually making the sealing and bearing components. And then we also have more than 50 customer solution centers worldwide. And these are our sales and engineering support facilities. So in addition to our range of standard products, we also work with our customers to create custom engineered solutions. And we also offer a deep product range that's going to include patented products, proprietary materials, and we really like to focus on global support, but at the local level. And then we also can work on value chain solutions.
There's a lot of activity. Yeah, go ahead, Domenico.
We're also constantly innovating, working with our customers to unlock new insights through data science and IoT. So I've traveled to a few different countries, including the US, worked with people in fluid power all over.
Yeah, as we said before, there's a lot of new activity and opportunity in the fluid power industry for IoT-related projects, and I think that's part of what we're going to talk about on our episode here today. I led off with the idea of your sustainability initiatives, and that's a broad subject. Maybe we can start there. You know, why, as a company, why is Trelleborg so interested in sustainability as an issue?
So our president and CEO of the Trelleborg Group, Peter Nielsen, I'll reference a quote that he said recently: "Doing just enough is no longer sufficient for customers and society. It's time for a greater leap to further align our sustainability efforts with manufacturing best practices for the future." Mm. So it goes to follow that if business processes have to change and the products need to become more sustainable or eco-friendly, then the business models also need to be reviewed, which is to an extent where IoT comes in, because digitization is more than just converting analog to binary. It's also about rethinking processes and paradigms.
Mm-hmm. And then from a practical standpoint, in terms of products or materials and the way that we do manufacturing, we try to incorporate sustainable methods into our manufacturing wherever possible. So this can include optimizing our tooling and machining programs to limit production waste. We can also regrind material for non-critical components such as wipers and wear rings. This essentially involves grinding the production waste into the material blend so it is essentially reused. Mm. And many of our manufacturing facilities are also working on eco-packaging initiatives to reduce our plastic usage there. And then outside of manufacturing, we're able to use FEA in simulation to predict seal performance, and that allows us to modify our designs prior to any testing, which helps limit prototype loops, which can take a lot of time, and they can often use, a number of materials, both our materials and our customers' materials. And finally, our products look to provide sustainable options for our customers. As an example of this, our lubrication management program extends seal life and reduces scrap, but it's also significantly reducing friction, lowering the energy required to power hydraulic systems, and then that potentially enables the downsizing of the drive components that drive these systems.
Yeah, it's interesting. First of all, that's a great overview of sustainability efforts going on at Trelleborg. And Domenico, I appreciate the quote that you mentioned from your president and CEO, because it seems to be focused on the customer, in terms of the reason for doing these sustainability efforts across the organization. And what Michael just said really kind of brings that home in terms of trying to deliver more sustainable products to the customer. I've heard that referred to in the past as circular products, products that get renewed and redone. Is that a term that you guys use inside of Trelleborg?
Yes, it's a term that we've actually come about in recent months that we've done some more investigation into. So the circular economy itself is a concept that really drives us to reconsider our current approach to manufacturing. And we refer to this current approach as the linear economy.
Mm-hmm.
So within this linear economy, we see the process of take, make, and dispose. And that's referring to taking resources from the earth, making those into a specific product, and then disposing of that product
Right.
when it's no longer wanted.
Right.
And oftentimes that's regardless of whether it's reached the end of its useful life. So as the name suggests, the circular economy really looks to prolong the useful life of manufactured goods while also limiting the use of non-renewable resources and ultimately waste. So these goals can be accomplished through sustainable sourcing,
Mm-hmm.
efficient manufacturing, reuse or remanufacture of used products, and then ultimately recycling of components into raw materials that are then used for the new products. And ideally, this is leading to minimal waste and, as we said, reducing the amount of non-renewable resources that are used. So circular products thus support the circular economy by lasting longer, using less energy, having useful second lives, and then allowing for recycling. So at Trelleborg, we're able to offer products and materials that support this circular economy through the concept of design thinking. And that essentially means that we consider the circular economy at the design phase. And so that allows itself to manifest in various focus areas. And I'll touch on those focus areas briefly here.
Yeah.
So first of all, we can design seals for performance. And that means that the longer a seal lives its functional life, the less waste and raw materials that are going to be used, and there's more return on investment. Secondly, seals can be designed for the environment. And this is pretty straightforward. If they're leak-free seals, they're minimizing any contamination to ground or water resources. Next, seals can be designed for energy efficiency. And this involves creating seals that have lower friction, which reduces energy consumption from motors and drive systems that are used to move the applications where the seals are installed. Next, seals can be designed for modularity. And this means that we're using standard design profiles and sizes to make access to repair parts easier, and that minimizes manufacturing costs through economy of scale. And then finally, we design seals for repair. So that helps extend the product life and makes installation and removal a simpler process when the seal does reach the end of its useful life.
Michael, if I can just jump in there, listening to that list of end uses, if you will, I'm struck by how in line they are. I think, Michael, you were part of our road mapping committee this last cycle. That's a project that NFPA does to identify developmental needs for the fluid power industry. And all of these issues that you just went through, leak-free and longer life and greater energy efficiency and greater modularity are all things that the market is looking for, right? In terms of what's coming out of that process. So I really like the way, you know, the sustainability efforts or the circular products, as you've described them, provide that added value, if you will, that the industry is looking for. Have you received much feedback from customers in that regard?
This is a relatively new framing for this, and you know, you referenced the technology roadmap, and
Yeah.
it was really good for a number of our team members to be involved in that process, because on the sealing side, is it's a component supplier. The customers are driving many of the activities in the focus areas that we work on, and so seeing the process of the technology roadmap, seeing some of those outputs from it, drives us to reconsider, you know, how we're positioning the products and materials that we have,
Right.
and also the areas that we should focus on for future development. So I think this is going to be a concept that we really kind of take and run with in the coming months and years.
That's great. Yeah, and we'll put a link to the roadmap in the show notes to the episode. If anybody's interested, they can go download that and take a look at some of the content that's there. But another big issue that comes off often is predictive maintenance, and I think that's something that you guys are working on as well. Is that right?
Sure. As Michael described, the design of the seals goes a long way to improving sustainability, but it's not the only approach. So predictive maintenance, or more specifically looking at the behavior of the seal within the application, takes us a step further. There are, of course, several use cases behind predictive maintenance. The obvious one is financial. But if we can safely elongate the maintenance period, especially for harsh applications, then there's also a clear sustainability impact, because this means we're using less consumables and we're replacing those wear and tear parts less often. So seals are a very critical component in many of these applications, and often because it's a part that's subject to high wear and tear, it's the first part to fail, and when it does, it causes sometimes catastrophic failure. So being able to predict when that seal will fail means that we can safely have the application go for longer and still have those benefits of the ecological impact. I mean, if you think about just the transport and logistics involved in getting parts and people to some of these more remote applications, it certainly has quite an impact.
Absolutely. Yeah, sustainability and long life are absolutely essential. So that predictive nature of the products is really, really important. We've reached the point in our show where we need to take a quick break. We'll continue with our guests in just a moment, but let's take a brief pause to provide an update on some other opportunities for the fluid power industry. Okay, Michael and Domenico, I think what we wanted to do now is talk a little bit about some concrete examples, about some applications of this technology that you've been describing. And in order to do that, I think I know you have something called cognitive sealing as kind of a new strategy or a new product to bring to some of those applications. Can you describe for us what that is?
Sure. Yeah, cognitive sealing is something we've been working on over the last few years. And the goal of cognitive sealing is to help companies increase the safety of their machines and applications, while at the same time reducing maintenance and the cost of unexpected downtime. So IoT, or the Internet of Things, as Domenico said earlier, allows for the remote monitoring of devices and the collection of data. So as seals are often critical components within processing systems, cognitive sealing can offer real benefits to manufacturers. So at Trelleborg, we've built a team of highly skilled data scientists, electronic engineers, and sealing experts who are able to assist in developing condition monitoring solutions. So they help with sensor selection, data analytics, and artificial intelligence, or AI. And then we collaborate with the customers to develop predictive failure models. We're building system health dashboards, and ultimately we're improving the system operation beyond the seals.
Yeah, so some companies have their own predictive failure programs. which doesn't exclude us. In fact, just the opposite. So cognitive sealing, as Michael described, it can be seen as an additional module that plugs into predictive maintenance programs that OEMs may already have. Because data science is more than just applying AI to a bunch of data. It's also about capturing the specialized domain knowledge and combining that engineer know-how with targeted data capture. And it's based on that the data scientist develops the algorithms that we end up using in these applications.
Yeah, I wonder if you guys can describe that a little bit more from the customer's point of view. Like, what is the, what's the, it sounds more like it's a product service suite that you're providing, not just seals, right? So how does the customer interact with that?
It's actually a really great question. So our experience is that customers are really at different points in that cycle. So some have the expertise on the electronics, some don't. Some have some data knowledge, some don't.
Right.
And so we're able to complement customers and fit into wherever they are in that cycle. So we're able to work with their engineers, with their data guys, with their electronics guys, or provide those resources for them if they don't have them.
So is this like an interface with their existing maintenance dashboards and things like that, or it's a whole new system that they have to onboard?
Well, it really depends. So in applications that are more mature, there we would add just a module. So for example, in agricultural applications like tractors and harvesters and stuff, they're quite sophisticated today. And so there we would offer just the algorithm that would be focused on predicting when the seal fails, and then they will take that component and add that to the rest of the predictive maintenance algorithms that they're applying to the overall application. But then there are other applications where they're a bit more rough and tumble. They haven't really invested in or developed the application to include all the data capture devices, and there we consult. We help them choose the sensors, give advice as to where to place the sensors to get the best result, and we look at the failure mode. So those types of applications are driven by what it is that we're trying to achieve. Yeah. So the mistake with IoT is saying, okay, we don't have that, we need that, let's go and stick on a bunch of sensors. Our approach is much more practical, and we look at, okay, where's this application failing, how is it failing, and how do we solve those very specific problems? Yeah.
It sounds great. I mean, it's the more I hear you describe it, Domenico, it's very customized. It's there's a tight relationship between the supplier and the customer that has to take place in order for that to be implemented effectively.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. So I think some of the AI guys or the data science guys might have you believe that it's plug and play. You go into the store and you buy some AI. It simply doesn't work that way. So each application is different, and so each algorithm is tailored to that application.
And as Michael described earlier, there's real benefits associated with that partnership, in terms of productivity or energy efficiency or other gains that you can get from your system as a result. I wonder if we can talk about a specific application to maybe ground this a little bit better and understand how the systems might work. One area that I've heard you talk about in the past is something called Compensated Gangways. Can you describe what that application is and how this system might work there?
Sure. Motion compensated gangways are typically seen in offshore applications. They allow people or materials to be transported between installations, either fixed or floating. So that means connecting a ship to an oil rig or something along those lines.
Right.
As you can imagine, the ocean is typically not conducive to stable movement from the one area to the next, and can vary from relatively calm to somewhat extreme. And these motion compensated gangways use hydraulic cylinders to provide stability at the point of transfer and allow people and materials to cross safely without wild movements, and then mirroring the ocean's conditions. And that works using real-time sensors and a control system to guarantee safety.
Yeah, I want to interject. I have to interject there because this is one of those only fluid power can examples that we like to talk about, right? So it's just amazing to me where you find fluid power and where you find hydraulics. So only fluid power can stably connect two moving platforms on the ocean and safely transport people and materials across it, right? So that's a great application that is not top of mind, I don't think, for a lot of people, but. Talk to us then about how the IoT and cognitive sealing works in such an application.
Sure. I mean, I'm not an engineer, but I share your fascination with applications like this. It really is quite something to see this thing in action. So we worked with a operator manufacturer not too long ago on a project. Unfortunately, I can't share too much in the way of the details of the project as it contains some sensitive IP, but the principle in the end is always the same. So these remote projects have either a predictive failure or predictive maintenance focus. To clarify, these two terms or approaches are somewhat interchangeable. So predictive failure is more referenced or aimed at highlighting anomalous failures, so when something unexpected occurs, whereas the latter is more aimed at trying to safely extend the maintenance cycle. So knowing how much longer you can use that application before you start running into trouble. But the algorithms are essentially the same. In fact, I suppose from a different point of view, even the distinction between financial or environmental is relatively small, because the longer and more safely these applications operate, the better the outcome. And so if it's a complex 6-cylinder hexapod system in a compensated gangway or a remote alternative and energy application, one way or the other, we're helping our customers operate more sustainably.
Mm-hmm.
From an IoT perspective, these types of applications are obviously ideal because they have a high cost of downtime, they're safety critical, but it also allows for another benefit, which is, and Michael spoke about this earlier, is this kind of the circular or closed loop functionality where we're able to monitor the usage and performance of these applications and then derive new insights. Using this, because we learn about the system, we can adapt the seal design and material and then feed those changes back into the system, always with the result of better performance, longer lifespan, and less environmental impact.
That's a great example. You know, as you said, it's one of those applications that it's kind of mission critical. You can't have it go down unexpectedly for any reason. It's going to put people at risk. So it's a great example of that analysis. Are there other areas, or what is Trelleborg doing to try and bring more of this approach to other applications right now?
There's, as you said, there's fluid power everywhere. So we are working in other industries as well. But I think why energy is interesting is because these applications tend to be remote, and they tend to be quite extreme for some of the reason as well.
Right. So what is Trelleborg doing to implement these concepts of cognitive sealing in circular products?
So from a circular products perspective, we're really looking right now, since this is somewhat of a new focus for us, we're looking to position our newer products and also some existing products and materials against the key facets of the circular economy that we previously discussed. And we also want to ensure that we're properly aligning with our customers on their capabilities, because those capabilities feed in to our capabilities and vice versa. It's a partnership. So additionally, we're looking, for future development. And so we see some of these following areas as either current or future development projects that we think will ultimately help us drive the circular economy. So I'll briefly touch on those.
Sure.
So the first is next generation central tire inflation. system solutions. We have a current product that works in those CTIS applications, but we're developing the next generation of that.
Mm-hmm.
We're also working to develop what we call super compounds, or compounds that are really able to meet a wide range of customer regulations and also environmental standards that different governments or regulatory bodies in certain parts of the world are putting out, on a pretty consistent basis.
Right.
3D printing is something that I believe everybody has some level of focus on, and we're looking at it as well when it comes to, what sealing components could we possibly 3D print. We have lighter weight composite materials that we're working on at some of our facilities. Organically sourced seal materials, that's a relatively new one as well. And then finally, the concept of sealing as a service. So this is very basic at this stage, but I guess think about, instead of buying a specific seal, think of partnering with a seal company to obtain a certain level of sealing over the course of a project's life. So that's
Sure.
that's one's very nebulous at this stage, but something we're considering for the future.
Well, those are a lot of very interesting initiatives that you just described. I mean, again, going back to the roadmap discussion that I mentioned earlier, new materials and 3D printing, and organically sourced materials are all kind of part of that future plan as well. So it's good to hear that you guys are working in those spaces as well. What about the cognitive sealing approach? Are there anticipated developments in that space?
Sure, we're constantly working on new ways to make those algorithms more accurate. Each algorithm is, however, developed somewhat uniquely for that application. So while the general principles are the same, even if you have the same size and shape cylinder, depending on the way that you're using that, you're going to have different indicators for when that seal will fail. So what we do is we look at the data from normal or healthy operation of a specific application, and then we compare that to what failure modes might look like. So we then use data science techniques to find correlations between the various sensors and patterns. They're kind of like fingerprints. So if we look at the temperature and the pressure and vibration, etc., it's not just what they're doing at any one point in time, but it's how the one set of data is correlating to another. And then when we look at that over time, when we get those algorithms correct, then we can spot these trends or these fingerprints ahead of time, and we can predict what might happen. Sometimes just knowing a few minutes ahead of time can save somebody's life.
Yeah.
Or can save extensive damaged application. Ideally, of course, we try to make those predictions more than just a few minutes or hours, but some days or weeks, possibly even months ahead of time.
It's fascinating. I mean, it seems clear as I listen again to you guys describe the future work in this area that Trelleborg must see this as a real growth opportunity. For this kind of service and these kinds of products. How would you guys describe that future growth in this space?
Michael's already mentioned this idea of modularity and other seal design ideas.
Mm-hmm.
We've combined IoT with this approach, and we've developed a new product. Again, I can't share much of that directly in this podcast, but customers are welcome to reach out to me, those who have an NDA with us, and I can tell them more about how that works. What I will say is it changes the business model somewhat because it lends itself to reusing components in quite a smart way. And I think all I can tell you really at this point is that we're combining sealing technology, AI, electronics, and putting that together in an easy to use modular system, which will reduce the design time and allow for much quicker go-to-market functionality.
Wow.
Right. And so for the circular economy and circular products, we're really going to continue to see further adoption based on the sustainability and environmentally conscious objectives of the world's largest countries and companies, many of these companies being our customers. And Trelleborg is far from the only manufacturer that has a focus on these concepts.
Mm-hmm.
So our goal is really to partner with our customers who are pursuing those overarching objectives of prolonging equipment life and limiting waste. The concepts that we discussed today, they really can be broadly applied to most organizations' products or materials. And many companies in the fluid power space are already taking proactive steps in support of this initiative.
Right.
And just as a plug here, another one of my colleagues and I were able to take a deeper dive into the concept of circular economy, circular products, and design thinking at our recent virtual conference here in the Americas. And I would encourage any interested listeners to take a look at the recording that will be linked to this podcast.
Absolutely. Yeah, we'll be happy to put a link to that conference in the show notes for this episode. And it sounds fascinating. As you said, there's a lot of value currently being brought to a wide variety of applications in the fluid power space and even more broadly. But as you've just laid out, the future is even more exciting for some of these technologies. So we would certainly encourage our listeners to go check that out. So that is going to wrap things up for this episode of Fluid Power Forum. I want to give my thanks to Michael Cook and Domenico Tucci, who have been my guests on this show. If you'd like to connect with them, the best way to do that is by their email addresses, and we'll be sure to put links to those addresses also in the show notes for this episode. Remember, if you like our podcast, please follow us on Twitter. You can find us there at the NFPA. And do keep sharing those interesting and innovative uses of fluid power with our hashtag #OnlyFluidPowerCan. Also, to see the latest fluid power technology and learn from industry experts, make your plans now to attend IFPE, the International Fluid Power Exposition. Our next show will be March of 2023 in Las Vegas, Nevada. For more information, visit ifpe.com. Fluid Power Forum is a podcast of the National Fluid Power Association. We are ably produced by Maddie Parise, our communications manager, and I'm your host, Eric Lanke, reminding you to join us next time in the forum.